In part 3 of our urinary system, we're going to wrap up discussing both the anatomical and the physiological structures that are associated with the urinary system in both the male and the female. A few conditions that exist. An itis ending means an inflammation. Nephritis is an inflammation of the kidney tissue. Cystitis is an inflammation of the bladder. Nocturia is bedwetting. Retention is a failure to void or to pee. Suppression or anuria is a failure of the kidneys to make urine or making urine less than 50 milliliters. What we look at is that there are books of conditions that exist with kidney disorders and kidney disease, and we're just covering a few. The renal calculi is another term for the kidney stones. The common component of the kidney stones is calcium oxalate, uric acid, or calcium phosphate. Once a person has had their first kidney stone, they are prone to having future kidney stones. Depending on a person's age, sex, and health, the body is 50 to 75% water. The intracellular fluid, abbreviated IFC, inside the cells is about 2/3 of the total body fluids. The extracellular fluid, ECF, is about 1/3 of the total body fluids and is outside of the cells. So the types of extracellular fluid would be the blood plasma, which is found in the blood vessels, the interstitial fluid between the cells. You can find that, in between the cells. And then you have the lymph tissue, gastric juices, tears, synovial fluid. Because water serves as a universal solvent, it's just going to be all over the body to help break solutions down. The internal environment is bathed our cells in this water substance, and it's going to help to carry dissolved nutrients, gases, and waste throughout the body system. The solutes are classified as broadly electrolytes. Electrolytes are chemical substances such as salts, acids, and bases. When they dissolve, they will dissociate or break down into ions. Ions are charged particles. Non-electrolytes are chemicals which do not break down to form ions. Examples of non-electrolytes would be glucose, lipids, and proteins. Example of electrolytes would be like sodium, magnesium, potassium. In order to control the water balance in our bodies, we control the number of solutes. The most important solutes to control are going to be the electrolytes because they dissociate when they dissolve and they create more particles. The three general functions of the electrolytes, they're essential minerals. They control osmosis between the body and the body compartments. This is the movement of water from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. They also help to control the pH between the acids and the bases in the body. Examples of electrolytes include sodium, chlorine, and potassium as big ones. Sodium is the most abundant, and it's used for nerve transmissions for muscle contractions. Chloride or chlorine is primarily an extracellular one that's used in osmotic regulation. Potassium is the most abundant cation in the intracellular fluids. It helps maintain the fluid volume of the cells and to control the pH of the cells. Calcium is a component in bone. It also helps for blood clotting and for nerve and muscle impulses. Phosphate is an intracellular electrolyte, and it's an important part of the nucleic acids because it's the P in ATP. Osmotic regulation is the maintenance of the normal water and salt balance in the body. Water enters the bodies in a variety of ways, drinking it, through the food that we eat, etc. It can be lost through evaporation. When we sweat, it can be lost through excretion. It can be lost through feces. So to be fluid balanced, the amount of water that exits the body has to equal the amount of water that enters the body. You can tell if this is balanced by looking at your urine. Your urine should be almost clear color if you've got that balance. If it's more yellow, then you are not keeping the balance. You have more water leaving than you have entering the body. The working unit of the urinary system is the nephron. When we look at how the nephrons separate out and filter material out of the blood, the kidneys usually will filter 45 gallons of blood per day. The plasma is filtered and removed roughly 60 times in a day. There are 3 steps in nephron urine formation. Step 1 is glomerular filtration. This is where the fluids and the solutes are forced out of the glomerular capillaries by hydrostatic pressure. This is the blood pressure because the afferent arteriole is bringing more blood in than the efferent arteriole is allowing to leave. It is non-selective in that anything that's small enough to pass through is going to pass through. And that, again, that's because of those fenestrated capillaries being very porous. The glomerular hydrostatic pressure is abbreviated GHP. It means the blood pressure entering the glomerulus. It should be kept higher because the afferent arteriole is larger than the efferent arteriole. This pressure moves the fluid out of the glomerulus at a force of about 60 millimeters of mercury. The 2 forces that oppose glomerular hydrostatic pressure are the capillary hydrostatic pressure. This is the pressure that resists due to the fluids already being in the glomerular capsule. This is about 60 millimeters of mercury. We also have the blood osmotic pressure. Since the blood remains more concentrated than the filtrate, the water tries to move back into the glomerular capillaries at about 30 millimeters of pressure. So that the net filtration pressure is the result of all 3 of these pressures. And it's going to be the glomerular hydrostatic pressure, 60, minusing the CHP and the BOP. And so it would be roughly 10. So the glomerular filtration rate is the amount of the filtrate that flows out of all the renal corpuscles out of both kidneys per minute. Normally, we should have about 125 milliliters per minute, or about 48 gallons per day. 99% of this filtrate will be reabsorbed back into the blood, leaving only 1 to 1.5 liters of urine produced per day. Step 2 is the tubular reabsorption, and this is the movement of the filtrate from the renal tubules back into the blood vessels. Needed substances are going to be removed from the filtrate and returned back into the peritubular capillary system. The reabsorption occurs both passively and actively, meaning some occurs without energy of the body being used, while others require body to use up energy to reabsorb that needed material. The permeability of the epithelial cells of the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting tubule is controlled by ADH, which is antidiuretic hormone. So urine concentration is controlled by the antidiuretic hormone, which increases the permeability and the reabsorption. The proximal convoluted tubules absorb about 80% of the filtrate that is absorbed. If one takes alcohol, it blocks antidiuretic hormone, which prevents the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting tubules to reabsorb the water that it could use. In the tubular secretion, the chemicals still in the blood, which are not needed by the body, are discharged into the urine by tubular secretion. This is important in eliminating substances that are too large to pass through the pores and into the proximal convoluted tubule. It's also important in eliminating undesirable or excessive substances which have been reabsorbed. So it rids the body of like potassium. It helps to control that blood pH.